conservative,
Christian, mother, wife,
Air Force veteran.
gun rights advocate.
This is Stacy on the Right. Here's your host, Stacy Washington.
Thanks for being with us and rocking and rolling on a Friday night. I'm so excited to talk to our next guest. It's Amy Cooke, founder, president, and chairman of Always On Energy Research. Her handle on X is the right AOC. You got to give it a follow. Amy, welcome in.
Hey, thank you, Stacy. I appreciate you having me on the show. And for mentioning my Twitter handle, I decided I wanted to make my initials AOC great again.
Because those are, well, it's now an infamous set of initials, I would say. Some people would say famous.
Yes.
I think it's infamous because now, admittedly, it is difficult to get admitted to Brown University where she went, but she didn't get a difficult degree. And even so, you say, okay, it's a bachelor's, you have to offer respect for that. But then you look at the work that she's doing, and much of it is based on her appearance. She is attractive, and so she uses that as her currency as opposed to using her intellect. And there are plenty of attractive women in America who use intellect well, and the attractiveness is just something that they're able to kind of almost weaponize to further the intellect. But not so with AOC. And I've had people insult me. Just recently, someone was like, oh, AOC is so much further ahead of you. You know what? She is. She has millions and millions and millions of dollars that she gets to insider trade into her wealth funnel. I don't have that because I'm not grifting against the American taxpayer. So she's ahead of me in wickedness, but pretty much everywhere else. I'm married. I have children. I'm looking forward to grandchildren one day if the Lord so blesses me. I feel like there's a different metric by which we judge ourselves than those who are just sold out to politics. And she's an example of that. So I'm glad you're reclaiming the initials because it's such a shame that she's able to use that moniker and make money off of it. So let's talk about energy, one of my favorite subjects. So you are talking about a $1 billion solar farm that was destroyed overnight. So this is one of those exercises in wickedness that just enrages me. I feel so like I'm angry, but I also feel powerless because right now they're building data centers all over the country and in the rural areas where we need to grow food. People just are so short-sighted. Well, first of all, why would we spend $1 billion on a solar farm?
Boy, there's a good question. Ratepayers have to pay for that. So the investor-owned utility in Indiana just passes that cost on to customers like you and me. Plus, here was the other thing. Those were put into operation when subsidies were, being lavished upon utilities to build things like solar farms or solar. They're not even farms. They're industrial capacities that are put out in urban areas. So they got all kinds of subsidies from the federal government. So this is the thing that is to me one of the most insidious. So if you're making money off of that solar array, the one that was destroyed in Indiana after just 1 to 2 years of operation, you have working families in other states that are paying for that through their tax dollars. So you have maybe a lower income family in Mississippi or in New Mexico or someplace else that is helping to pay for that solar array, which is why we get this narrative that it's so cheap. Let's just build solar and wind. It's so cheap, but it's really not, Stacy. In fact, some of the single most expensive power you will find are solar and wind in these large, they'll say, well, it's an economy of scale. No, it's not. And it also doesn't include all of the ancillary costs that come on top of those solar panels. We say this all the time. Just because you can, there's cheap generation like solar or wind, it doesn't mean it's cheap electricity. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's super expensive to get that stuff onto the grid and to your house. So if you actually want to keep the lights on, and that's what we do at Always On, we try to figure out the the least expensive way for, states or utilities, anybody who wants to know what is the cheapest way for them to keep the lights on. And that's what we do. And I can tell you this much, that solar facility, actually two of them, that cost over $1 billion that's now destroyed, totally destroyed, and will have to be rebuilt. And I'm sure insurance will pay for some of that, but there will be a deductible. But the question becomes on all of that, if you had a solar farm that was only operational for 1 to 2 years at most, and you've paid over $1 billion for it, and you have to rebuild it, why would you rebuild something that is, at the whims of Mother Nature? When the coal facility right down the road, yes, there could have been some damage to that. It could have been a rooftop or something like that. But it's going to be a whole lot harder to destroy that in an F1 tornado. But these wind and solar facilities, you're taking it, people are taken in by this. It's cheap generation. Maybe, but it's really expensive electricity. And it's electricity that keeps the lights on, not just the generation. You have to look at the total system cost. So that's a really expensive solar facility in Indiana that at $1 billion, I don't know what it'll cost today to be replaced. But remember, they won't be able to get it operational in time to be subsidized, because one big beautiful bill rolled all of those subsidies back. They won't be able to get all of that done and operational in time. So it's going to be even more expensive just to Indiana customers. The utility customers are going to have to pay a pretty penny for it. And it still doesn't really keep the lights on in any kind of reliable way. They need reliable power, not intermittent at the whims of Mother Nature.
So let's talk just a little bit further into that. For anybody who is this their first time on this subject, and that's kind of like, that's a bit of a stretch for it to be someone's first time really tuning into this. But the reason I say that is because a lot of what we've been sold about clean energy is that if we could just get enough clean energy, if we could just do enough of it. The problem is that everyone's so entrenched and so intransigent and so against, they use these words, these terms that make it sound as if we could just get the old fuddy-duddies out of the way, then we would have the ability to do what we need to do for energy. And that would make it possible for us to have the clean energy revolution. It's not that it can't work or that it's not efficient. It's that it's the old fuddy-duddies like Stacy Washington. She doesn't want clean energy. She hates it. Stacy hates the earth and she spits on it all the time. I'm like, well, first of all, I don't spit. I'm a lady. And second of all, I just absolutely love anything that is a technological marvel. And I think within a balanced set of reasonable circumstances, these technological marvels bring us closer to that Star Wars, Star Trek kind of a reality where, we're just banging on all cylinders. We're just doing the most. We're flying in spaceships. We're living in the special buildings where, I don't have to clean anything and laundry is done by a robot. Bring it on. But that's not what we're getting. So make no mistake about it. This isn't about people keeping this from working. You said it's at the whims of Mother Nature. It's that, but it's even more than that. It's so much worse than that because Mother Nature allows for coal-fired plants to be operational 24 hours a day, generating power at such a clip that we have come to take it for granted, right? That's one thing we don't have. We don't have a lot of problems with power generation unless it's extreme weather. And even then, the downtime is minimal. And the redundancies make it possible for us to kind of overcome those difficulties. With the solar, you're dependent upon the sun. The sun has to be out. And then you're also dependent upon, like you said, if something destroys the actual array. With a coal-fired plant, I mean, I don't know if I'm right here, but I'm assuming I've never seen a news story where a coal-fired plant was destroyed by weather.
If it was destroyed by weather, it would have to be significantly worse than an F1 tornado.
Right.
I mean, the F1 is, it is, I'm not going to take for granted any tornado, right? I mean, I live in the rural Weld County, Colorado, and we have a lot of tornadoes and hailstorms. So I wouldn't take any of that for granted. But I can pretty much assure you that a coal plant isn't going to be flattened by an F1. But there's something that they don't factor in when it comes to wind and solar, and it's just the fragility of all of it. So you think you put it out there, well, they can be destroyed by hailstorms too. So it doesn't even have to be a tornado. Hailstorms can destroy them. But the problem, besides just how they can be destroyed by Mother Nature, is the cost of them. They aren't just fragile in and of themselves. They also increase the fragility of our grid. They don't enhance it. They decrease reliability, and that's a huge problem because they're often farther away from population centers. They also have to have transmission and distribution lines. And the other thing, and nobody takes this into it, well, I shouldn't say nobody, you do, I do, others do, we have to think about the total system cost. And for wind and solar, especially this particular solar facility, which only had about a 21% capacity factor, meaning that of its total capacity for generating power, it really only provided about 21% of that. Now, you wouldn't hire a sales clerk to only work for you 21% of the time and only when they felt like it. No one would do that.
Oh, my gosh. And there's any employee. Can you imagine? Oh. No. And imagine then you also had to hire a backup, which you paid for 100% of the time, for the 80% of the time that you weren't sure when your employee was going to show up. But that's what we have to do with solar and wind. You have to have backup to them. They aren't reliable. Your coal plant is reliable. I mean, it can be turning and burning 24/7. It is providing power to its customers 24/7. Now, does it go down periodically? You bet. Does it need maintenance? Yep. All of those things are true. But for the most part, it is there when you need it. It is a baseload workhorse. We call natural gas an on time because the fuel comes in and it is used. We call wind and solar intermittent weather dependent. And that's because sometimes it'll be there, sometimes it won't. But it won't be there when you need it the most. So if there's an extreme weather event, if Winter Storm Fern or this tornado or something like that takes it out, and a lot of those storms do take weather-dependent resources offline. Your coal plants stay online, your nuclear plants stay online, and generally your natural gas plants will as well, so long as they are properly weatherized. They can continue providing power. Not so with wind and solar. So you have to pay for a backup. So they'll say, well, let's just get batteries. Okay, well, the batteries need backup too. One of the other things we do is we model for reliability. And I can tell you these states that are planning on 100% wind and solar, and then we're going to have these 12-hour battery backups. Well, they don't even exist yet. So congratulations for putting your people, your residents, onto a grid with technology that doesn't even exist yet. But then if you have some big weather event, like in Colorado, we'll have a 3-day windstorm, or in St. Louis, you'll have Missouri, you'll have those ice storms. If it goes for days, several days, we have our model, we have a proprietary model for reliability. We're showing in some of these states that customers could experience, between 2 days and 3-day outages at times when it's bitter, bitter cold. I mean, that's when people die, Stacy. When they don't have power, that's when people die. So we had that happen here twice. Twice.
No.
We've had the ice storm twice in the 26 years that my husband and I have lived here. We've had the ice storms come through twice. And it wasn't like we didn't know an ice storm was coming, but there's still the issue of you don't know who's going to lose power, and you don't know out of the ones who have lost power if they're going to take the logical step, which is they have a small generator, or they have gas in their house, so their house is still warm. But for people who don't have gas, or their gas is shut off, because you have people who have food insecurity and utility insecurity, and then so it's a perfect storm. Literally, not to abuse the word, but it's a perfect storm. And then you'll have some deaths. It's people who aren't prepared for this type of an event, or individuals who, they don't take the common sense route. Their house is without power. There's no natural gas heating. They decide to stay there and they hunker down, maybe put a space heater in, or just try to weather it through, and they're elderly and they can't stand the cold. Young people can sleep overnight in a 50-degree room and be just fine, but elderly people cannot. And so then you have that issue where there are deaths or people who have accidents on the road, because let's face it, when the roads are icy, that's when everyone's like, well, I'm going to go to Walmart one more time, and the road is completely iced up. And, then they have car accidents and pileups and people die that way. We had that in Kansas City the year before last, and it was a 250 car pileup. And it happened 2 years in a row.
Wow.
Yeah. And these are hardworking, hearty Midwesterners. There's nothing heartier than a Midwesterner in a winter storm. They got their 5 loaves of bread, 5 gallons of milk. They're ready to go. But these people were stuck in a pileup because, these big 18-wheelers, they need further time to stop, and they just couldn't stop on the ice. The roads were so much more icy than the warning gave people like preparedness for. And so I just, and you actually, you hail from the Midwest. You're a St. Louis transplant, because you're up in beautiful Colorado. Gorgeous. It's unbelievable there. But you know about this from both sides, because Colorado has extreme weather and so does St. Louis.
You bet. And fragility, when I say fragility, it isn't just, like I said, it isn't just like the weather. It is what it does to the grid. And then there's a cost to that, and that cost so you have to do the backup, right? Like you talked about, people have to have some kind of backup generation. Well, your grid needs backup generation. And because it is fragile now, more fragile than ever, especially if they're pushing these mandates for weather-dependent resources, now your grid's becoming more expensive and more fragile. And the cost of that fragility isn't just in dollars, it's in what you talked about. It's also in human lives. And that's the existential threat. Our existential threat is not carbon in the atmosphere. Our existential threat, or as AOC, the wrong AOC, has said, that we only have 11 years. Our existential threat is climate change. No, our existential threat is no power. That's where the real threat is, and that's what happens when you put you trust your grid to unreliable, intermittent, weather-dependent resources. I don't know why anyone would do it. You think about this: farmers hedge against this stuff by buying insurance against it. And yet we have states in this country that want to put their entire grids into just wind and solar. It'll be economically devastating, but it can also just destroy the fabric of your society if you can't depend on reliable, affordable, abundant power, which is really why I love President Trump's his embrace. And by the way, Secretary Chris Wright, who I think best energy secretary ever, this embracing of American energy abundance. We don't have to choose between a clean environment and abundant resources. We're Americans. We can do all of that and provide it to our, to citizens affordably, reliably, safe, and clean. We can do all of that. It's not an either or. So those people who are forcing us into this either or, you can only be one or the other. That's why I love the way President Trump handles energy in this country. He's absolutely spot on.
He's brilliant at it, and he has a business person's mindset on it where, it's just logic. Does this work 24 hours a day? If that's a yes, it's a go. Oh, I'm sorry. This is intermittently up and down, but takes 3 to 10 times more land mass than a coal-fired power plant. Also, another easy way to figure out if we're on the right track is what are our enemies trying to get us to build, and what are they building, and what would they like us to stop building? Well, China is our geopolitical foe. They are building a coal-fired plant. They're up from one a month to one every week. They want us to build so-called clean energy, but China is building coal-fired power plants. So do you do what your enemy tells you to do, or do you do what you think would be best for your country? It's such a huge question for me, because I kind of look at it and I say, oh, wow, someone who doesn't like me thinks I should X, Y, or Z. Well, I'm probably not going to do this if I know that they've just been openly against me the way China is with America. They like to kill our citizens with fentanyl overdoses. That's a surefire sign if they're trying to get us to sign on to climate agreements and trying to get us to be, climate neutral or climate this or that, then that's a surefire way for me to think, so that's what I won't be doing. And that kind of rebelliousness is classic Trump. Like he's got whatever I just described on steroids. I love it.
I do too. And here's the other thing that he knows as well about especially about China. So you bringing up China is so important. China is building capacity because they want to be able to manufacture all of their own stuff, meaning think military equipment. And in the geopolitical scheme, which I know you know well, having been in the military, China would love nothing more than their adversary to be relying on intermittent, unreliable resources to power our grid, because then we can't build anything. We can't manufacture anything. Part of the reason why we won World War II is because we could outproduce anyone, because we had the resources and we had the initiative to do it. Now what China is doing, and if I get sick reading these headlines in Bloomberg and the New York Times that are, China winning the clean energy race and all. They look at it through that myopic lens of emissions only, and they think that China is somehow winning because they build more wind and solar. It has nothing to do with what they build. It has everything to do with what you just said before, which is that they may be installing some wind and solar, but the real installation, the real power generation for them is coming from coal, and it's coming from nuclear. Wind and solar are just
exactly.
Those
are
like
just shows.
Show to them.
Right. They do those as a show. That way they can use the people on the left in our country are useful idiots for them. They'll say, oh, China's so far ahead of us in green energy. And China just lies about their numbers. They lie about the efficiency of green energy because they don't have any reason. When I say reason, I'm saying they don't have an impetus to tell the truth about it. It's not like they're sitting up and thinking, how can we do this, to the Americans, but still be honest? You know what I mean? Like they're not at home worried about, the numbers we're giving, they're not actually accurate. So they don't expect accuracy or anything else like that. They're just like, hey, we have an enemy to fight. It's America. We also need to, buy things from them and build things, and we need their technology. We need our citizens to go there and be anchor babies and get citizenship so they can have free access to universities. Paying the out-of-state tuition seems idiotic when they have the anchor baby thing going on. And no matter what we do, until we fix some of these systemic problems, they're going to have a leg up on us, but not because they are smarter or more creative or have better anything, but because they're willing to they're dirty. They play dirty. They play whatever the hand is they're dealt. They like take that down 10 notches. They're like the mob. And they're always finding a way in to go around anything that normal countries would see as, this is a barrier to our entry, or this is something that, we might not want to be involved in, or whatever it is. The Chinese don't have any qualms about doing to us worse than they would do to anybody else. Like we're at the very top of their list for that kind of malicious behavior. They are fine with downing us. So for us, we've already built the technological marvel of the world. We've already worked hard to place ourselves ahead of the other countries, and not in a malicious way. That's the thing about America. We rebuilt Europe after the war. After the war, we rode in and saved them from. Like, we saved their buns and then rebuilt Europe and made it the arts and cultural capital of the universe. And meanwhile, they're looking down on us because, our citizens shop at Walmart. Well, we're shopping at Walmart because we also have to fund the defense of not just our country, but every other westernized country on the globe. I mean, there's some things that we're doing that no longer make sense, but we have to admit them looking down on us it should be the impetus for us to make some changes, because we don't deserve this. We don't deserve their ire and their disdain when we're their parents. They are our vassal states. All of the European countries, as rich as they are, they're just vassal states to us. When you look at who pays for their defense, it's us.
That's right. They have the luxury of being able to, I love it, they can be smug, frankly, sometimes insufferable. Because they don't have to they haven't had to pay for their own defense at all.
For 80 years.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Yeah. They haven't had to, 80 years, they haven't had to pay for it. But something else too, you talked about China, and right now, when it comes to energy, they are our biggest opponent and our biggest barrier in the United States, because you have the environmental NGOs that spend billions against our domestic energy industry. And they're just stooges for the Chinese. Before that, they were taking money, they're getting money from Russia to destroy hydraulic fracturing, because that had been such a boon to the oil and gas industry. The fact that we could drill straight down and then go directionally for miles made the available recoverable reserves that we had, it just expanded them tremendously. So our oil and gas supply went up exponentially, and it was threatening Russian oil and gas deliveries. So it was Russians who were pouring money into the United States in the early 2010s to try and disrupt the hydraulic fracturing boom, this oil and gas renaissance that we were enjoying in the United States. Thank goodness we didn't allow that to happen, because imagine where we'd be if we weren't the world's largest supplier or developer and producer of oil at this point. We would be in such a world of hurt. We were able to take on our adversaries like Iran because of President Trump's just intentional development of domestic oil and gas and all forms of energy that work. They used to love to say, oh, we want all of the above. We actually say, we want all that works. In other words, we want reliable, affordable, abundant energy that works. Because that's what Americans should expect. We shouldn't be, if you want solar panels on your roof, great, more power to you. But the idea of spending $1 billion on a solar, an industrial solar facility out in a rural area that has a capacity factor of somewhere in the low 20s, when I could take $1 billion and build a natural gas plant or a coal-fired power plant that with a capacity factor of 85%. I think, do the math. I'm probably going to go with the one who's going to show up a little bit more often.
Well, and reliability in comparison to miles expended, meaning how much of a footprint on the planet it takes up, it's not even a contest. The coal-fired plant, you're going to you maybe have an acre or two that you're devoting to that. Meanwhile, right, it's up 24/7, and it just lasts and lasts and lasts. We'd like to remodel these kind of facilities and do different things, but we don't have to. We don't have to do that. We can, they don't have to be fancy. They don't have to have, special offices and things like that. It's a coal-fired plant. People go there to work. They make a living. They put raise their families on that. And Americans like me, I just, I don't even notice like where the plant is. Or in fact, it's kind of funny. We'll be driving someplace and we drive through the rural area and I'll see a sign. I'm like, oh, that's where the coal-fired plant is. I had no idea there was one even there. Like, I've lived here for 20 some odd years. I had no idea there was one over there. But when you say that Russians were behind the anti-hydraulic fracturing, boy, does that make sense. Because one second, people are talking about the marvel of hydraulic fracturing. The next thing you know, it's the dangers of hydraulic fracturing. All these breathy op-eds, that it was because of something exploded because of hydraulic fracturing. And I was thinking, is it really dangerous? It's not like us to have an energy product that's really dangerous. Are we not aware of what this is doing? And I wonder how that, managed to get past all of the different things because we have all these different ways of catching things that are dangerous before they become full-blown products. And it turns out it was just propaganda.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And because I live in the county I live in, Weld County, Colorado, we had at one point something like 25,000 oil wells. 99.9% of them had been hydraulically fractured. And, they would talk about, oh, my gosh, the air quality and all of this stuff that was so horrible going on in my county. And go, well, so tell me where are all these kids, these dead children that you're talking about? Because I haven't seen them. The other thing is the beauty of what this county, where producing a product that people want and need, and you said something earlier about these are just hardworking people and these are good paying jobs, right? These are guys and gals that can get a high school diploma. Maybe they don't want to go to college, and they can go work for an oil and gas company, be outside if that's what they want to do, and they can make a six-figure salary. They're your friends. They're your neighbors. They go to church with you. You see them in the grocery store. They live across the street from you. These are just good, honest, hardworking folks that want to be able to put a roof over their kids' heads, maybe take a vacation, and you're demonizing them, saying that they are producing a product that is killing Americans, hurting Americans, when they live in the very community where they're developing it. Do you honestly believe that your friends and neighbors are the ones that they would produce a product that they thought was dangerous to their own children? Of course they wouldn't. But much of that stuff, that there was actually a letter that was sent, and it was mid-2010s, about that Congress was tracing money that the Russians had funneled into a couple of offshore accounts that were then ending up in the coffers of some of these foundations that were giving money to environmental NGOs that were opposing hydraulic fracturing. And of course they were, because the Russians didn't want the United States developing oil and gas. They want the United States dependent on anyone else. And that's why what President Trump has been doing about making sure that we are strong domestically with our oil and gas, with all of our developing our resources safely and responsibly, is so crucial. And it is the absolute opposite. It's 180 degrees from what was happening in the Biden administration, and before him, the Obama administration.
And also, what's so interesting about it, because I find this fascinating, is we're talking about China. China actually understands Americans a lot more than the Europeans. They've been making fun of us for, they make fun of us because of, we like oil. We like, they think oil is disgusting. We like, guns. They think guns are disgusting. If we were the people that they like, if we were the people that they admire and respect, then we never would have rowed in to save them at the beaches of Normandy. We never would, there's so many things that Americans writ large would never have tolerated, because look at the way that they're behaving to us. The Iran war, what we're demonstrating in our ability to undertake the Iran war after knocking down all of their nuclear aspirations last summer, what we're demonstrating is that, we have our own reserves. As a country, our oil reserves make it such that we don't have to care about what's going on in Iran. And so what that also means is that we as a people can afford to liberate the Iranian people. And if they're vulgarians, they're disgusting Walmart wares, whatever you call us, you can't assail the fact that our military is fully operational and ready to rumble, while theirs, well, first of all, they can't even muster 5,000 people to help the Ukrainians, let alone do anything about the Strait of Hormuz or Iran. So, but I want to stress that everyone's talking about this as a young guy, or I don't know his age, but he's a pilot. And we went in and we risked the lives of other active duty service members to rescue him and another pilot that were downed. And we got them back. We sent in Delta Force and we got them back. And what I'm hearing, there's all these, it's so funny that these people have access to Twitter, because if we didn't create Twitter, they wouldn't have a way to let us know how much they, dislike us. But in any case, they're tweeting about this. They are writing articles about how Americans are so crazy. They actually risked the lives of 100 people and, 5 planes to rescue one guy. Well, it wasn't one guy. It was 2, number one. And number 2, we did it because, first of all, it's a promise we make to troops when they're on active duty. You're on active duty, and we promise you in that initial training session, OTS for officers and, technical school and basic training for enlisteds, we promise you that if you are downed, if you are killed, your body comes home. We don't leave anybody behind. The promise is made, and it's made not just from the brass and leadership to our active duty service members. It's made by the people you're in the room with. I remember promising never to leave anyone behind. When I was on active duty, I didn't even have a rank at that time. I was bare on both shoulders in basic training, and they brought us in a Marine and a Navy SEAL, an Air Force pilot, and an ops guy. I don't even remember what branch he was from. They talked about how they had took turns carrying an injured service member over miles of terrain in Iraq, in I think it was in Iraq. It was a long time ago. And they were talking about how they had to carry him, but he was injured, and of course it slowed them down, but they weren't going to leave him behind. And how to this day they still, they're still in contact. This is a relationship that they've built over many years of still knowing each other after that harrowing experience. But they would never have left him behind. So I'm just sitting here wondering why. So Europeans don't understand that? Europeans don't believe you should, pick up your injured service member and bring them back with you? This is who we're dealing with. So no wonder they don't understand our energy policy, right? No wonder they don't understand.
100%. And we don't. And I heard a great quote last night that, it takes 200 years of culture to make sure you don't leave anyone behind. That isn't just something that happened overnight. The United States, we don't leave people behind. And the importance, I can't say enough about the importance of our domestic production. We don't leave anyone behind because we can afford to not leave anyone behind. We're not going to do it. So, yes, we value human life that much. We value it so much, we can't be at the mercy of regimes that hate us. And that's why it's so important that we have our own domestic production, and that oil, gas, coal, uranium, all of it, our critical minerals, the whole array, everything that we need for our own infrastructure. It's so, so important. And Stacy, when I hear people say, "Oh my gosh, the price of gas or the price of a barrel of oil went up over $100 a barrel," I will remind everyone that in 2008, when we didn't have all of our own precious reserves, if you remember, there was a huge price spike. It went up to $147 a barrel, which in today's dollars would be over $200 a barrel.
I remember.
Imagine when we're paying $8 a gallon for gas. So,
like the Europeans have been paying since I was a child. They've been paying they were paying 8 Deutschmarks a gallon back when I was a kid growing up in Germany on a military base. I'm just laughing because I remember I said, "Mom, why does it say 8 Deutschmarks?" And she said, the Germans, they don't want to, they don't have the same energy policy that we do. I said, energy policy? I'm a kid. I'm like, oh my gosh. I just thought, that how are they going to buy like their ice cream and stuff like that if they have to pay 8 when we were paying something like, under $1 on base? Now, obviously, Deutschmarks were at the time about $3 to $1, but that's still, it's still 5 times what we were paying. I mean, I keep looking at it and I keep thinking to myself, this is what we dealt with. We've been dealing with is that energy is plenteous. It's cheap. We don't have to borrow for it. It's never an issue for us. Like we don't know how good we have it. Gosh. That's right.
Because, and you said another thing that is so important there. When it isn't abundant and reliable and affordable, you said, okay, so ice cream, but when you have to pay more of your money to just keep your home warm and the lights on, there is less available for you and your family to do other things. Our own domestic supply is crucial. We should never be at the whims of a hostile regime or any regime. And we're Americans. We can do this. We can develop responsibly and have clean air and water. Our communities can thrive, and we can be safeguards of our environment, good stewards of our environment. The idea that we have to be on this energy deprivation diet is ludicrous. That is a road to energy. Well, it's a road to poverty, period, and economic stagnation. So what President Trump is doing is 100% right. And the reason why we felt the impacts for sure on the conflict in Iran, but nothing like we would have had something like this happened 15, 20 years ago. And the reason why so many other presidents talked tough but did nothing is because they couldn't. They would have been, can you imagine if you'd have tied up the Middle East in some kind of conflict? The sheer panic without our own supply would have been off the charts. As it is right now, yes, prices have gone up, but it's nothing like what had happened in the past when we didn't have control over our own supply. So I thank President Trump for that.
I do too. Another reason why others haven't done as much about this is because they didn't have the stones, as they said in The Fifth Element. For those who haven't seen that movie, it's old, but it's great sci-fi. And I'm not trying to be, it's not bravado for me because I'm a woman and I don't have bravado. But what I do have is a massive amount of respect for people in leadership positions who take the tough road now because it will be an impossible road later. They take the tough road now, sacrifice themselves in the court of public opinion, but they do so to our benefit in the future. That kind of leadership is what brought us in to assist Europe in World War II, what made it possible for us to do what we did and still have an explosive economy here in the United States, and one that is still unmatched to this day. The Germans were getting there, but now they've decided to take the green energy route. That's why the Germans don't have a technology industry. They've sacrificed everything on the altar of green energy. And so I just encourage people to do some research. And also because we're running out of time, and I knew it. I knew as soon as I saw that Twitter handle, I was like, this is going to be a banger. And it has been. You have to come back and join us again. But until then, I want everyone to know that Amy Cooke is founder, president, and chairman of Always On Energy Research. You can go to The Right AOC and give her a follow. And then she has this story here about the $1 billion solar farm and so much more. Like if you're interested in lots of different cool things, go to aoenergy.org, aoenergy.org. You'll see her face right there. She's smiling at you. She's basically saying, get you some of that cheap American energy and love it. She's basically smiling that at you. She's going straight to your soul. Thank you so much for coming on and for the work that you're doing. This is the thing, doing this work. It's so great.
Well, thank you, Stacy, and bless you. Appreciate the work you do and your service to our country.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Amy Cooke, thanks for coming on tonight.